Ditarata Sharate Shrabhigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridhaya Rati Kavaye Muhyanti Yasuraya Tejo Bari Mridam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Manisha Dhamna Svena Sadhana Rasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Chapter 1. So we're continuing Ajamil's story. So where we left off, Parikshit Maharaj has asked the question how the living entities can be saved from going to hell, having heard about the many hellish regions in the universe. Shukadeva Goswami and testing disciple first gave answers according to karmis and gyanis. Parikshit Maharaj passing the test and being dissatisfied with those answers, heard the answer according to the bhaktas. Only by bhakti yoga, kecha kevalaya bhaktya, only through this bhakti yoga, pure bhakti yoga, which is rare, then one can be saved from all the sins completely without their returning. So this is basically the answer. And does that bhakti have to be solid? Someone may say, okay, if the bhakti is deep, then it gives this effect. But the bhakti doesn't even have to be deep. So then this verse was stated, Sakremana Krishna Padara Vindayor Niveshitam Ta Gunaragi Yariha. Eteya Mam Pashtavritash Ta Bhatan Swapne Pi Pashtanti Hichirna Niskrita. Even that bhakti, Sakremana Krishna Padara Vindayo Niveshitam. Even that mind that only once absorbs in the Krishna's lotus feet, Tagunaragi, even that mind is full of the, material rag, materialism. Still, even that person, so in other words, this person is not necessarily deep bhakta. The bhakti is not deep. Still, even that person will not have to see the order carriers of Yamaraj who carry the living entities to hell with the ropes. Swapne api, even in the dreams, they will not have to see what to speak in real life. Pashanti hirchirna nishkritya. They will not have to see. Swapne api pashanti, even in their dreams, they will not see. Because chirna nishkrita, they have fully performed atonement. Just by that bhakti yoga. So again, by the Mutika Nyaya principle, if the mind that thinks only one time, what to speak of the mind that thinks regularly, if even the mind that is having the material attraction, what to speak of a mind devoid of material attraction, even if in dreams, you will not have to see what to speak of a mind that is fully absorbed in Krishna. In this way, bhakti is a solution to this, or the answer to the question. So he wants to present a narrative that demonstrates this very point. So that starts the next passage. You can say from verse 20 to 40, basically. He's telling the story. From verse 20 to the end of the chapter, but from verse 20 to 40 is like you can say a distinct passage. He wants to tell a story that demonstrates this principle, which he's mentioning in verse 19. So it starts here. Why not look at all these verses because they're very straightforward. And the commentary is also very straightforward. In this regard, learned scholars and saintly persons describe a very old historical incident involving a discussion between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Yamaraj. Please hear this from me. Okay, so let's hear this story. So in the city known as Kanya Kubja, there was a Brahmana named Ajamila, who married a prostitute maidservant and lost all his Brahminical qualities because of the association of that low-class woman. So once upon a time, there was a Brahmana, Dvija Kashit, some Brahmana. His name was Ajamila. He later on married a prostitute. So he lost all his Brahminical qualities. Namna Nashtra Siddhacharu. His Ajamila Namna means his name was Ajamila, or Nashtra Siddhacharu. So he lost all his sadachar, Because of dasya samsarga dushtita, because of the association of that lady. So that is just to be noted, and because it's going to come up in the commentaries later. So he was a brahmana. So that means one who is situated in Satoguna. But his Brahminical life was destroyed by his association with a prostitute. Okay, next. This fallen Brahmana, Ajamila, gave trouble to others by arresting them, by cheating them and gambling, or by directly plundering them. This was the way he earned his livelihood and maintained his wife and children. So he gave harm to other living entities. So very sinful person he became because of the bad association. That's the basic idea here. Next verse. My dear king, while he thus spent his time in abominable sinful activities to maintain his family of many sons, 88 years of his life passed by. So he became old like this. Next verse. That old man, Ajamil, had 10 sons, of whom the youngest was a baby named Narayana. Since Narayana was the youngest of all the sons, he was naturally very dear to both his father and mother. Prabhupada comments, the word pravayasa means he was very old. Prabhupada comments here, the fact that he was very old and was still having children is indicative of his sinful life, because in Vedic culture, after 50, basically sex life can continue up till 50. And then after 50, one is expected, especially for Brahmana, to withdraw from, household affairs and sexual engagement and pursue the spiritual life more comprehensively. So if one does not do so, then one is considered also as sinful. And then if you're having children, so this is an indication of the sinful life. So that's how Prabhupada, elaborates on this pravayasa, giving us some insight into how the Vedic culture was at the time. Okay, next verse. So because of the child's broken language and awkward movements, old Ajamila was very much attached to him. He always took care of the child and enjoyed the child's activities. So naturally, he was attached to this young boy. When Ajamil chewed food and ate it, he called the child to chew and eat. And when he drank, he called the child to drink also, always engaged and taking care of the child and calling his name. Narayana. Ajamil could not understand that his own time was now exhausted and that death was upon him. So I think it's here. Is it here? Or maybe it's the next verse. But the acharyas, let's look at the next verse. Yeah, it's this verse. Okay. So yeah, he's always calling Narayana, come eat. Narayana, come chew the food. Narayana, come play. So he's saying Narayana's name all the time because of affection for the child. And in this way, his life was passing and death was upon him. He did not notice it. Next verse. When the time of death arrived for the foolish Ajamila, he began thinking exclusively of his son, Narayana. Matim chakara tanaye, bale Narayana hoye. This last line here. So death was upon him. He's about to die. And at that time, Matim chakara. So Matim chakara means his mind became fully concentrated on his son, whose name was Narayana. Tanaye bhale Narayana ahoye. So he was remembering Narayana at the time of death. So all the acharyas are basically giving comment, and Prabhupada is making reference here also, that he developed bhakti by chanting the name Narayana. Even from the first time he chanted the name of Narayana, he developed bhakti. And every subsequent time of chanting the name of Narayana, after that, his bhakti was growing. So basically the timeline that we get in this short narrative of 8 verses from 20 to 27 is that he was a Brahmana, that his Brahminical life was destroyed by bad association. He became extremely sinful, giving harm to others, having children even at old age. He had a son named Narayana, and then by calling the name of son Narayana, he developed bhakti. So that's just the progression of his life as we're hearing it from Shukadeva Goswami. And this progression is important to be noted when we get to chapter 2 and we study one big commentary from Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on Nam Tattva. So this progression of his life story is important. First, Brahmana, destruction of Brahmanical life, and then the development of bhakti, later by having a son named Narayana. Okay, so Matim Chakara, he concentrated on Narayana. This is the purpose of life, to remember Narayana at the end of life. So Prabhupada opens his purport with this verse from the beginning of the canto, because this question was also asked by Parikshit Maharaj. What is the duty of all men, especially the dying man? What should he hear? What should he chant? What should he remember? That was his question. And also the opposite, what should he not hear, not chant, not remember? So Shukadeva Goswami, when giving answer to Parikshit Maharaj, spoke this verse also. Etavan Sankya Yogbhyam Swadharma Parinishtaya Janma Labha Param Pungsa Ante Narayana Shmiti. The highest perfection of human life achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by acquirement of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of one's occupational duties, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Janma Labha Param Pungsam. So you've taken human birth, and the highest labh, the highest attainment for that human life, either you do Sankhya, or you do yoga, or you do Swadharma, means Varnashram Dharma. If you achieve perfection in any of these systems, it should end in remembrance of Narayana. Ante Narayana Shmiti. So this verse is also saying, Matim Chakara, that Ajamil concentrated on Narayana at the time of death. So that means he's achieved the perfection of life, according to this beginning statement of Shukadeva Goswami. But someone may say, but he was not thinking of Narayana, he was thinking of sun only. How can you say he achieved the goal of life? So that's what the acharyas want to expand on their subsequent commentaries. Yes, he was thinking of his son, but because his son's name was Narayana, and the name of Narayana is not different from Narayana. So he developed bhakti, and that is how he was able to remember the Lord at the end of life. So how he developed this bhakti? Just by chanting a holy name. That's basically the theme of this Ajamil story. Okay, so that timeline is to be noted. So shifting gears, here comes the Yamadutas. Next verse. Ajamil then saw the three awkward persons with deformed bodily features, fierce, twisted faces, and hair standing erect on their bodies with ropes in their hands. They had come to take him away to the abode of Yamaraj. When he saw them, he was extremely bewildered, and because of attachment to his child who was playing a short distance away, Ajamil began to call him loudly by his name. Thus, with tears in his eyes, he somehow or other chanted the holy name of Narayana. Lucky him. Okay, next verse. So, my dear king, the order carriers of Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, arrived immediately when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of dying Ajamila, who had certainly chanted without offense because he had chanted in complete anxiety. I was supposed to mention this in the previous verse. Here in the beginning, it says, Sapasha hastam trindrishtva. He saw three Yamadutas. So although he had performed unlimited sins, those sins can be categorized into three. Sins performed with mind, sins performed with body, and sins performed with speech. So therefore, three Yamadutas came. And Narayana has four syllables. Narayana. Those four syllables. So for this reason, four Vishnu Dutas came. So there are three Yamadutas, messengers of Yamaraj, and four Vishnu Dutas, messengers of Lord Vishnu. Because four syllables in the name of Narayana. Narayana. So Nishamyam Rayamanasha Mukuto Hari Kirtana. So when these hearing the Hari Kirtan from the mouth of the dying man, Nishamyam Rayamanasha Mukuto Hari Kirtana. Hearing Hari Kirtan from the mouth of the dying man, Bhartu Nama Maharaja Parashada Sarasatpatan. hearing what? The Bartunama, the holy name of their master, Parshada. Parshada means the associates of the Lord, the Vishnu Dutas here. So they immediately arrived to that spot, hearing the holy name of their master. From the mouth of the dying man, Ajamil, they heard his kirtan. So 4 Vishnu Dutas have come. Nice. Next verse. So the order carriers and Yamaraj were snatching the soul from the core of the heart of Ajamil, the husband of the prostitute. But with resounding voices, the messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, forbade them to do so. So they're snatching the subtle body, basically, from Ajamil's gross body. They're going to take it to hell. But Vishnu Dutas stopped them. They have very deep voice. We can imagine. Varayam Asura Ujasa. They forbade them to do so with resounding voices and deep voices. So you can imagine it must have been scary. I don't want to act it out because my voice would be too loud in the microphone, but you can imagine, aggression. That, that sound that comes in a man's voice when he's like, I'm about to hurt you. So you can imagine their aggression was there. So the Yamadutas become bewildered, incredulous, in fact. When the order carries the Yamaraj, next verse, the son of the sun god, were thus forbidden, they replied, Keyuyam pratishedharo dharma rajasha sashanam. Who are you, sirs, that have the audacity to challenge the jurisdiction of Yamaraj? Keyuyam. So who are all you people? Pratishedhara. You're opposing dharma rajasya sashanam. You're imposing the jurisdiction of Dharmaraj, who is Yamaraj. So who are you people? They go on, next verse. Dear sirs, whose servants are you? Where have you come from? And why are you forbidding us to touch the body of Ajamil? So Kasyava, whose servants are you? Kuta Ayata, where have you come from? Kasmat Astra Nishedhata. What is the reason you are forbidding us from taking away this sinful person? This is our job. Kim Deva Upadeva Ya Yuyam Kim Siddha Satama. Are you Devas? Are you Upadevas, like sub-demigods? Are you Siddha Satama? Are you the topmost of perfected persons? Siddha Satama. So they can understand these are some extraordinary entities, the Yamadutas. So this is what's fueling or will fuel their incredulity. Because they can say this is obviously some people who know what is proper, what is dharma. Are you devas? Are you upadeva? Are you siddha sattama? All these, they're guessing in this way because clearly you have some effulgence, some beauty. Well, we'll see. They're going to describe their beauty. So why are you obstructing? They cannot understand. So next verse, 3 verses, is a description of the beauty of the Vishnu Dutas. Translation here. Your eyes are just like the petals of the lotus flowers, dressed in yellow silken garments, decorated with garlands of lotuses and wearing very attractive helmets. On your heads and earrings on your ears, you all appear fresh and youthful. Your 4 long arms are decorated with bows and quivers of arrows and with swords, clubs, conch shells, disc, and lotus flowers. Your effulgence has dissipated the darkness of this place with extraordinary illumination. Now, sirs, why are you obstructing us? So this is why they are incredulous, because they can understand that they are pious persons at the very least, if not something even more extraordinary. Even by their own effulgence, they're removing the darkness in the area. So they're obviously exalted persons. They should know what is right and wrong. And for the Yamadutas, you're stopping us from arresting a sinful person, which is wrong. So they're incredulous. So they're asking these questions to the Vishnu Dutas. So Vishnu Dutas will respond. Sri Shukadev says, being thus addressed by the messengers of Yamaraj, the servants of Vasudev smiled and spoke the following words in voices as deep as the sound of rumbling clouds. So here, in the commentary of Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, if I remember correctly, he's saying that the Vishnu Dutas themselves, they were also incredulous. They actually didn't believe them. Well, it's said like this in the commentary. They give us a sense of the emotional dynamics going on. That the Vishnu Dutas didn't believe the Yamadutas, that you are servants of Yamaraj because you are arresting a person who is not sinful. You've only told you are servants of Yamaraj because you're scared of us. Because you know we will chastise you, so you become afraid. So you say that we are servants of Yamaraj because Yamaraj is Mahajana. Mahajana is one of the great souls. Mahajana Yanakata Sapanta. What is that? Dharmasya Tattvam Nihatam Guhaya Mahajana Yanakata Sapanta. How does that verse start? This particular verse. Tarko, Tarko, oh my God. Neither Nasham Vrisha Yashamatamna Bhinam. That's the second line. Then the first line is Tarko Pratishta Shrutayo Vibhinam. Nasham Yasha Natamna Bhinam. Dharmasya Tatam Nihatam Guhaya Mahajana Yanakata Sapanta. Wow, I need to work on my verses. I'm a little rusty, some of these old verses. This verse is saying that if you want to know the Dharmasya Tattvam, the truth of Dharma, so you cannot understand it by argument. Tarka apratishta. Argument is insubstantial in establishing the truth of Dharma. Some fellows using some sort of logic makes sense. And then some other fellow comes with opposite, some other logic contradicting this guy. That also makes sense. And that way everyone becomes confused what is the actual truth. That's happening all the time. Shrutayo vibhinam, even you do hearing, you cannot ascertain so easily what is the truth of Dharma. Because Shastra is telling so many things, so you become confused. Now, there's so many munis, rishis, and you're not considered rishi. This is how Prabhupada likes to translate. I like it this way. Unless your opinion differs from other rishis, you're not considered a muni. So intelligent person is always giving some other angle. That's why if you, for example, study Vedanta Sutra, so many commentators giving so many angles of vision, you also become confused. So how you understand what is the actual truth of Dharma? So Dharmasya Tattvam Nihata Guhayam. The Dharmasya Tattvam, the truth of Dharma, is hidden in the cave of a devotee's heart. Just like in cave, you may find many precious jewels. So in the heart of a devotee, you can find the jewels of the truth of Dharma, the true religion. So Mahajana Yanakatasapanta. So one should follow the path established by such persons called as Mahajanas. So we'll come to actually here in this pastime, chapter 3. There are 12 Mahajanas, and Yamaraj is one of the Mahajanas. So he will be respected by all devotees. So the Vishnu Dutas also respect Yamaraj, and you're saying that you guys are followers of that Mahajana, but he certainly knows the truth of Dharma. And you guys are taking someone who is dharmic in the true sense. Therefore, we cannot believe you are followers of Yamaraj. And so Sri Vishnu giving some commentary indicating this is the emotional dynamics. They're incredulous. Just as Yamadutas are incredulous, so the Vishnudutas themselves are also incredulous. So you're just selling this because you're scared. We're about to punish you if you don't let go of him. So Mega Nirhadhaya Gita, they spoke with words that sounded like the rumbling of clouds. I mean, it's very scary. Just before storm comes, the clouds gather and heavy sound is coming. You would get a little nervous, especially the thunder is there, right? The thunder is just the heavy sound coming in the sky. Sometimes you jump. So their voice is very resounding. We're about to punish you guys, talking nonsense, telling lies. But the Yamadutas are insisting, no, we are followers of Dharmaraj. Okay, so we have some questions for you then. So there's the next verse. So the Vishnu Dutas saying that their Yamadutas are insisting, no, we're not lying. We're actually servants of Yamaraj, Yamaduta. Okay, if you are servants of of Yamaraj. So we have some questions for you then. Yuyam vai dharma raja shayadi Nirdesha karina. If you are really the order carriers of Dharmaraj, that's what this first line. Bruta dharmasya nastatvam yacha dharmasya lakshanam. If you are actually servants of Yamaraj, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion. So there basically, I guess you can say there are two questions there. One question is dharmasya tattvam. So we already just indicated from this Mahabharata verse I quoted, this dharmasya tattvam is in the heart of the Mahajanas. So they're asking this question, what is the dharmasya tattvam? And they also want to know what is the dharmasya lakshanam. So in other words, what is the essence of dharma and how can that be measured? And also they want to know what is the essence of adharma. So adharmasya tattvam. And how can that adharma be measured? So basically two questions or four. I mean, how do you think, depending on how you want to think about it. So these two questions, they should be noted. What is the essence of dharma and how can that be measured? And what is the essence of adharma and how can that be measured? So two questions we'll say. So that's the first question. Next verse. Katam swit driyate dhanda kim vasya stadnam ipsitam. Darndya kim karina sarve ahoswit katachinirnam. So what is the process of punishing others? Katam swit driyate dhanda. So how do you administer the punishment? What is the process? Kim vasya stadnam ipsitam dandya. And who is, translation, who are the actual candidates for punishment? So what is your process? Who is the candidate for punishment? Who? And Kem karina sarve ahoswit katachinirna. What is the scope of the punishment? Is it every sarva karina? Is it all karina? Karina means a person who is doing the fruitive activity. They call us karina. And I mean, jivas, basically, unless your action is mukti, even Gan, I mean, Gan may get a little bit of a pass, but basically, all action is basically, karma only. It's regenerating the karma. So karina means the karmis, basically. So are all karmis punishable or only some of them? So what is the scope? Are animals punishable? Like, what is the scope of this punishment? So these are three extra questions. So you have the first two questions and then these three questions. So in the answers the Yamadutas will give, then these 5 questions that were addressed to them to demonstrate that they are indeed followers of Yamaraj will be answered. Okay, I hope you noted 5 questions are there. Okay, so they began to answer. First 2 questions, actually. So let's get into this. So this passage is basically from verse 40 to verse 55. We're not going to obviously get through all the verses. I think I even only went up to verse 45 in my notes. I think, let's see. But from verse 40 to 55, the Yamadutas are going to answer the question. So that's like a passage. And then from verse 56 to the end of the chapter, they themselves retell Ajamil's story with a little bit more details, demonstrating why they're taking the decision that they are taking in relationship to him. And this way they hope to be vindicated from punishment by the Vishnu Dutas. So these are what's left. So let's look at their answer. Great section, honestly. Veda pranihito dharmo, ya dharmas taviparyaya, Vedo Narayana Saksha Swayam Bhur Iti Shushruma. So the Yamadutas reply, that which is prescribed in the Vedas constitutes dharma, the religious principles, and the opposite of that is irreligion. The Vedas are directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, and are self-born. This we have heard from Yamaraj. So many nice points here. But in short, Veda pranihito dharma. So the question was, what is dharmasya tattvam, right? What is the essence of dharma? So they say the essence of dharma is what is in the Vedas. Whatever is in the Vedas is the essence of dharma. How can it be measured? Dharmasya lakshana, how can that dharma be measured? Well, it's measured by the injunctions. If you follow the injunctions of the Vedas, then you are called as a dharmic person. So the essence of dharma is whatever is in the Vedas. Whatever is prescribed in the Vedas is the essence of dharma. And if you follow those prescriptions, that's how it can be measured. And what is the opposite? He adharmas ta viparya. The essence of adharma is just the opposite of that. So what is forbidden in the Vedas is the essence of adharma, and the transgression of those, in other words, the performance of those forbidden things. That is how adharma is measured. So both these questions are answered in this first line. Simple. So of course, if you don't know Vedas, you're in trouble. You're trying to live the material life and you don't know Vedas, you're in big trouble. So that is why world is falling apart. They're trying to do sense gratification, no harm. Everyone, most jivas are after that only. It's quite normal. It's quite all right also in a sense. But you have to understand their boundaries. So that's what the modern materialist Western mentality, which has infected the entire world, they don't appreciate that there are limitations imposed on you, beginning with the body. The body is the fundamental imposition. So therefore, you can't touch fire even if you want to, because the body will burn. So from that imposition of the body, so many other impositions are coming. That's what, it seems that many with the Western infection, we are not able to appreciate. That once you have a body, that's the fundamental imposition. From that imposition, so many other impositions are coming. Just like sometimes you see these memes. Would you love me if I was like a frog? Like one partner is asking their wife or husband or spouse or whatever, would you love me if I was a frog? No, I wouldn't. Why you wouldn't love me if I was a frog? Because of the imposition of the body. If I have the imposition of a human body, that imposition disallows me from loving, at least as a spouse, a frog. That's due to the imposition of the body. If I get you say bed bug body or some other insect where they only have the ability to see two-dimensionally, they can't look up and down, they can only see forward and back, or just forward. So that's an imposition. From that imposition, so many other impositions are there. So you have to appreciate that. So Shastra, essence of Dharma is you have to follow what is in Shastra. That is the essence of Dharma. And that's for enjoyment also, no problem. You want to enjoy, you follow that. And if you break what is forbidden in Shastra, that is the essence of a Dharma. And that's how it can be measured also. First two questions answered. Veda, where do these Vedas come from? Veda, Narayana Saksha. So the Vedas are directly Narayana. So Srila Prabhupada and all of our acharyas are quoting that the Vedas are the breathing of Narayana. So just as there is no beginning to Narayana himself, there is no beginning to his breathing. So the Vedas are directly him, because it's his breath. Veda Narayana Sakshat. Swayambur, they are self-born, self-sufficient. That's how Prabhupada puts it. Swayambhu means one who is self-born. That's a name sometimes given to also Lord Brahma, for example, Swayambhu. One who is self-born, not having birth from others. So the Vedas are also like that, Swayambhu. They're not birth from others. In the material world, someone writes a book, right? So that book takes birth from the author. But the Vedas are the authorless words of God, which is very interesting, the way of thinking about it. Although we say the Vedas come from God, they do not come from God in the same way that a book comes from a writer who is writing the book. They are the authorless words of God. And the Vedas are such, therefore they're called Apurushaya Shabda, the superhuman sound coming from God. And it's kind of interesting that in the study of Pramana Tattva, the truth or principle of Pramana, we say that the Pramana is Apurushaya Shabda. We don't actually say Pramana is God, but we say that Apurushaya Shabda is the Pramana. So much so that even God himself references the Shabda also, even in Bhagavad Gita and other places, he himself will quote Shastra. So Shastra is like Narayana himself, Swayambhu, self-born. How you know all this? Iti Shushruma. We have heard this from Yamaraj, the Mahajan. We have heard this. So they're not speculating or just making this up. But this we have heard from Yamaraj. Very important point. It's the first point that Prabhupada elaborates on in his purport. How you can know all these things, that the Vedas are self-born, the authorless words of God, the breath of God, directly God. How you can know all this? You have to hear from those who have the knowledge. Otherwise, not possible. Whenever dealing with any transcendental truth or any truth that is beyond sensory perception. For example, the past is beyond the sensory perception, direct sensory perception. So you can only come to know about it if you know about it at all by hearing. So the Vedas, God, all transcendental realities, they exist before we come into existence as we are now. So we are to know about it, it can only be known through hearing. There is no other method for knowing it. So we have heard this from Yamaraj. That's how we know this thing. Okay, very nice verse. So they've answered the first two of the questions, basically. What is the essence and measurement of dharma and the essence and measurement of adharma? In one verse, they've answered this question. They elaborate a little bit on this. Yena, by whom? So this is referring to Narayana. Yena swadhamni ami bhava. Raja sattva tamomaya. Guna nama kriya rupayar vibhavyante yatatatam. So who is this Narayana? Someone may ask the question, who is this Narayana? So Narayana is swadhamni, one who is in his own spiritual abode, and by whom there is manifestation, vibhavyante, there is manifestation, ami bhava, of the different living entities that you see in this world through the gunas of nature, raja, sattva, tamomaya. So all the living entities we see in this world, well, we don't see living entities directly, we see their bodies. And their bodies are compositions of the different gunas of nature, a different, how you say, proportion of the different gunas of nature. So who has manifested these bodies? Well, you can say the Maya Shakti, but who is impelled the Maya Shakti to manifest these bodies? So that is ultimately the Supreme Lord. So Adhamni, and he can do this from his own abode. He can carry out the function of manifestation through his Shakti from his own abode. He doesn't have to directly be in the presence or and build it up or struggle. No, from his own abode, he can do this. So he generates the living entities through the Maya Shakti with these different proportions of the gunas of nature. And therefore, guna nama kriya rupa, they have different guna nama kriya rupa. So they have different gunas, such as peacefulness. They have different nama, name is given, such as brahmana. And then different activity, kriya, such as study. And then rupaya means form. I imagine that they have a certain form that marks them as Brahminical, for example. But in purport, the word for rupam, the Sri Vishwanath mentions varnashram, which I was like, okay, that was a little not clear. Or you have gunas like, heroism, and name like Kshatriya, Kriya, such as fighting, and then a certain rupa. So the guna, nama, kriya, rupa are manifested, are in relationship to these proportions of the gunas of Rajas, Sattva, Tamas. So you get a certain name and so on. And the instructions of the Vedas pertain to that imposition. So like I said, once the body is a fundamental imposition. So from that body, which is composed of different gunas, you have certain qualities, you're designated a certain position, such as Brahmana or Kshatriya within the culture. You have certain activities that are expected of you. So all of that, the instruction of the Vedas pertain to that imposition of the body on human beings. Yatatatam, all of this is done properly. So this is their foundational point. The essence is to do what is the essence and measurement of Dharma is the prescriptions in the Vedas. The essence and measurement of a Dharma is what's forbidden in the Vedas. And these bodies, they are also manifested by God through his Maya Shakti. And these bodies set the fundamental impositions that oblige those upon whom the imposition is coming, namely the jivas, to follow those injunctions that match the imposition that what's the word I'm looking for? Encircles, not encircles, and battles. That's also a good word, but not precisely what I'm looking for. Anyway, conditions them. That might be the best word. The imposition that conditions them. So then there are Vedas for them. They have to follow that. And if they transgress that, that's a dharma. They'll be punished. So there's their foundational point they're making to establish why they're punishing this guy, Ajamil. Okay. I'll move on a little bit. I don't see any questions in the chat box. I don't know if anyone wants to say anything. I'll move on just a little bit because I had a certain goal I was trying to hit today. But does anyone want to say anything? It's already 9 o'clock before we move on. Anyone has any extra?
I have a question, but I'm not sure if it's something that should be discussed later.
Ask.
Well, just, in regards to the Ajamil backstory. So, like, at least you said that the Yamaduzas will fill in some more details, but one piece that we heard is that he chanted Narayan, and he and then by chanting Narayan he developed bhakti.
Yes.
And so I guess the conclusion that we should have then, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but was he was also chanting without the 10 offenses?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I know I was discussing this with the group. We were trying to go through the 10 offenses and think about did he do any of those? And I guess inattentiveness while chanting, I don't know what the interpretation of that is, but what is that?
Inattention while chanting?
Yeah, it seems like, one way of it seemed like you could argue that he was inattentive because he's not thinking about Krishna, but I guess what does attentiveness mean? Is it just that you think about the name, or is that you think about something else related to Krishna? What does attentiveness while chanting mean?
Attentiveness while chanting means not doing other things while chanting. Also means trying to get your mind to think, focus on the name, at least. Focus on Krishna, but specifically in the form of the name. So ideally, I hope to maybe discuss this a little bit more as we go through this pastime, like a japa reform specifically, and talk about that a little bit more. 10 offenses also on reforming our japa, how we practice it. But like you see, like at least in our sanghas, we've kind of popularized inattentive chanting. Pulling out, when pulling out the beads, and like leaving it like your mark so you can go to the bathroom and do this thing and the other thing, and then coming back to it, inattentive chanting. Chanting and then talking in between inattentive chanting. Also, not allowing your mind to just wander hither and thither while chanting. That's also inattentive chanting. So one wants to maybe make a case, that's what you're saying, that Ajamil was like this, only he wasn't focused. I guess the idea here, because the word was used matim chakata, of course it was at the time of death, but his mati was like focused on Narayana, because when he was, of course, completely absorbed in his son with affection, but his son's name was Narayana, so when he said Narayana, he must have said it with concentration and with affection. So you got the result of that. Of course, we'll hear later on about Namabas and Namaparad. We're going to hear a little bit distinction there. So it seems like this will come up later, but it seems like, if you have enough ignorance, you get a pass for a few things. Your chanting counts as Namabas, and you get so much benefit from that Namabas. But
yeah, definitely. And he was also probably shielded from the Vaishnava aparad because what Vaishnava is there.
Yeah, he wasn't associating with devotees. So got that one.
Interesting.
Someone's going to say, well, what about the sinful life though? because he was, even after Narayana was born, he was probably, he was engaged in sinful activity. So that question is also going to come up in the commentaries. What about that? Was it not sinning on the strength of chanting? Well, he wasn't sinning on the strength of chanting. He was chanting and sinning. That's the difference. He was not sinning on the strength of like, oh, I'll get purified. He was just chanting on the one hand and also sinning on the other hand because he didn't know all these rules and so on. So all these things will get brought up. Yeah, quite a bit. Sri Vishwanath wants to comment on all these points in his big commentary, which we'll read together, which is very elaborate, like 14, 15 pages. Elaborate. Okay. Does anyone else want to say anything?
Yes, I was thinking like when it mentions that, like it was telling the story of Ajamil. So I was thinking that, okay, if Ajamil could get like all his sins removed, so then does it also mean that people who go to Bhakti Fest and hear from Krishna Das, like the names of God, their sins are also getting removed?
Maybe.
Yes,
Does that bother you?
No, because yeah, we heard that, oh, you have to hear from pure devotee the name, and then only means it will have effect and like that. But in the case of
There are
Ajamil,
different effects, right? So the holy name, the purpose of the holy name is not to get rid of some sin, right? That's such a low thing for the holy name. The holy name gives prem. So that's the real result of chanting Harinam without offenses, that it gives the premadan, right? Vajanera Madhya Sheshta Navavidya Bhakti, Krishna Prema Krishna Dite, Dhare Mahashakti, Tara Madhya Savra Shestra, Nama Sankirtan Aparade, Nam Lile Paya Premadan. So the real fruit of chanting holy name without offense is that it gives prema, right? What is this low thing? Get rid of some sins. That's just like some sidebar effect that comes from chanting. So even if, say, they chant Hare Krishna, the people at Bhakti Fest, that's your example. So all their sins can be destroyed also by that chanting. They have not really gotten the real effect of the holy name, though, because prema has not come. So yeah, we have our theology. You have to hear from pure devotee, right? You hear from pure devotee so you can get the real benefit of associating with Krishna in the form of his holy name, in the form of getting prema. But maybe so many other effects are coming from their chanting also. That is okay. But that chanting will not, that chanting will not necessarily give them the ultimate result. It may not even save them from samsara or give liberation, although it can. It says even Namabas can give up to liberation. That is also possible.
okay.
So it's quite possible. We need not feel disturbed that people at Bhakti Fest are being purified, but they don't get the real fruit of chanting or associating with the name in the form of the premadhan. So for that, you need a sangha of pure devotees.
And then similarly, this controlling the mind also is like a side effect of.
No, so mind will be controlled when it becomes fully Krishna conscious, right? Dritaya prashanaya dritangri padma sabhavati bhagavata pradhana ukta. When you have captured the feet of the Lord with the ropes of love, then because his feet are tied inside your mind, you'll always remember him. That's the idea of that particular verse. The reason why the smarna of devotees of Krishna is so deep on Krishna is because they've tied his feet with the ropes of love in their heart. So they're always thinking of him naturally because he's tied up there. This coming from 11th canto, chapter 2, verse 55, I think, last verse of the chapter. So until then, you can, apply it is saying that devotees practice chanting like some sort of yoga sadhana, right? So yoga sadhana deals with this, controlling the mind, concentrating the mind, getting the mind to get peace and all of that. So you may have a little bit of a yoga approach to the chanting in the beginning. So you sit and you concentrate on the name. Don't hear other sounds. If the mind is wandering, you bring it back to the name, back to the sound of the name. So it's like a yogic application. But ultimately, a peaceful mind is just the effect of chanting, some side effect of chanting Hare Krishna. The real effect of chanting Hare Krishna is that the mind is always thinking of Krishna. That's the real effect. And naturally, because it's always thinking of Krishna, side effect, peace.
Thank you.
Saying here, the concept of him somehow chanting Namabhasa and not Naparad and not ever committing Vaishnava Aparad while cheating everyone around him seems so impractical. Like Jagannath might committing, quote, every sin in the book without ever committing Vaishnava Aparad before encountering Nityananda. Is this story considered Leela? Feels orchestrated. Don't feel envious, Prabhu. The story is now orchestrated as far as I know. Of course, in one sense, everything in Bhagavatam is like pedagogy. You can look at it that way, but it's also a historical event. And Shukadev Goswami is telling this is a story that's well known. Story, it seems, in the culture. So it's not just orchestrated, it's like a history, but it also has something to teach us. So we take that part also. So you say, well, it just seems so impractical. He didn't even meet one Vaishnava and offend him. Looks like he didn't. So that is not told in the story, at least. So whether or not it's true, because what is true and what is false? Once something becomes history, you cannot say actually what is true, what is false. Just like, for example, to give a dramatic example, the Holocaust thing happens. Everyone knows it, right? So then there are these people who they call them as Holocaust deniers. So they have some argument that the Holocaust, as it's reported to us, is not actually how it went down. And they have so many arguments. Honestly, I've heard some of them, they're quite compelling. Some of the things that have brought up, they're like really, I was like, oh, whoa, that's compelling. And interestingly enough, I've met several Indian guys over the years who don't believe that the Holocaust happened in the way that it was reported to us. And it seems that even Prabhupada may be one amongst them, because Prabhupada has so many weird statements, weird for us because we received the history in a particular way, where he says, I don't think Hitler was such a bad person. He was killed by propaganda. Now, we find that to be abhorrent because we already heard the history in a particular way and accept it as such. But when you look at how much propagandizing goes on right now, just in relationship to highly sensitive issues like COVID and vaccine and so on, whether either side making their propaganda, you can understand that, okay, in times of war, that's really a tool that's used to shape perception. So what is it true? What is not true? You cannot actually say. No one can say. So when it comes to anything historical, the facts and figures are not as important as what is intended to teach you. That's the point I'm making. And that is basically how Indian, like if you encounter most schools in Indian metaphysics, that's how they deal with history. The facts and figures are not as important as what it's meant to teach you. Even the facts, suppose everyone's telling the truth about everything. And let's say they all have the same facts, which they can agree upon, but everyone interprets facts in different ways also, right? For example, in the American social landscape with this, who is that? George Floyd. So he was quote unquote killed by the police officer. He died. That was a fact. The fact that he died, that's a fact that everyone accepts. But how that fact is interpreted, you can hear two very distinct sides on interpretation. One interpretation was the drugs that killed him. The other interpretation was the police officer due to his racism that killed him. Others say the cop was not racist. That was just standard protocol for dealing with that sort of stuff, which is, turns out is a fact. Police, the way they arrested him and dealt with him was a standard protocol, which is also a fact. So people interpreting all the facts in so many ways. So what is actually real and not real? Who can say? That's the point I'm making. So what's more important, and this is how most like I said, metaphysics that you see in these Indian school of thoughts, they deal with history. It has something to teach you. So that part you can take. So we don't hear that Ajamil, committed Vaishnava Parad and all that. You say, well, it seems a little bit unbelievable. Well, unless you were directly present, you don't know either way. But then there's something that to be learned from that. Don't commit Vaishnava Aparad. Because in the story, as it's related to us, he did not do that. So that means that's an important part of the process. So that part we take, that teaching part, the part that is meant to educate us. Otherwise, what is fact? What is fiction? Who can say? Actually, no one can say. And people will go on arguing till their death about what is the facts of things. And even if they finally agree upon the facts, they will interpret it in a different way. And that way they will continue till death. Just like I tell this story is there. There was one rope was there and it was cut. So two people had different opinions for how the rope was cut. One person is saying the rope was cut by a rock, and the other one was saying it was cut by scissors. So they began getting into an argument over this. And you may say that sounds crazy, but looking at 21st century America, I can now believe anything is possible amongst humans. It's quite possible to get into fights over such things. So they got into a fight. Finally, the fellow who was saying rock became very aggressive, and he pushed the guy who was saying it was scissors into the river. And the guy was dying, drowning to his death, got pushed off a high peak into the river. As he's drowning in the river, he sticks his hand out of the river water and goes like this with his hands, if you could see me, indicating that it was cut. He wanted the last lick, that last lick. Even the guy throws him off the top of the peak, but he was like, I'm gonna get the last lick. Like this, people are fighting over how they interpret a fact, like the rope being cut. They're fighting over their interpretations also. So in this way, human life goes wasted, usually. So what are we to learn from the rope being cut? That is more important information. And as far as I understand, that's how most systems of philosophy, at least in India, deal with history. So did the events go down exactly as they were in the Mahabharata, exactly as they were written by Vyasadeva? On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, we know that Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita. Did he speak exactly like that, with that, using that poetry and taking that amount of time to explain all those points exactly like that? That may be drawn into question. The conch shells were already blown, which means it's time to fight. When you blow the conch shell, it means time to fight. Like you blow and then you start charging. The conch shells are already blown at the beginning of the Gita. And then Arjuna has his breakdown, and then Krishna speaks about Gita, and everyone's just like chilling after the conch shells have been blown. Seems a little bit strange. So one may draw into doubt this history as a literally true. Okay, whether literally true or not, Vyasadeva wants to teach us something that was valuable from the conversation that came between Krishna and Arjuna. Maybe the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna was much shorter because Arjuna was much more intelligent. So Krishna just says, indicates a few things: karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga. That thing gets wrapped up in like 10 minutes, and then bhakti yoga gets wrapped up in like another 10 minutes. Who knows? Maybe it was much shorter, but Vyasadeva spreads it out a little bit more so that we can learn. So what is the harm? What is the harm? Well, he's not representing is he not representing the truth? He's representing the truth, and maybe he's expanded a little bit so that we can digest the truth. So that's how these systems deal with history in India. Because otherwise, what is true and what is not true, you will not be able to say, actually. You will hear from one fellow, and I will hear from another fellow, and then we will fight. The rope was cut beginninglessly. Okay, maybe that is what we were to learn from that. Okay, anyone wants to say anything else? We'll continue Yamaduta's response tomorrow. This is very...
Yeah, well, maybe I should wait until you get to that point of the story. I was going to ask you about the end of Jamil's, after the Vishnu Dutas rescued him, only because it came up in conversation between me and somebody else yesterday. But if you want to wait until we get there, we can do that.
Well, what is the question? I missed it. I'm sorry.
Well, because I didn't actually really ask it properly. Right. I was going to ask, after Jamil was rescued by the Vishnu Dutas, was he taken to Haridwar, and what was, did he get a new? But I think it was in his that same old body that he.
We'll hear about that later. So after he's saved by Vishnu Dutas, then they disappear and he lives. He's not snatched out of the gross physical body yet. So then he goes to Haridwar and he associates with sadhus. He does sadhana, and then until the end of his life, and then he dies, and then transferred to spiritual world. That's how we'll hear about it later at the end of chapter 3.
So he remains on this earth planet in Haridwar.
Yeah. He lives a little bit longer and does sadhana.
Yeah. And at the end of that life, he gets transferred to the spiritual world.
Yeah, the same Vishnu Dutas come back to take him to the spiritual world.
Okay, and then one last thing. I mean, I know we've talked about this many times, but we can say that offenses are the 10 offenses, or maybe 11, and sin is just anything else. Can you say like that?
Yeah, you can say like that. We're hearing definition of sin from Yamadutas now, right? That which is forbidden in the Vedas. If you do that, then that is called a sin. Basically, that is the essence of adharma, or sinful activity. I'm
sorry, can you just repeat that one more time?
If something is forbidden in Vedas and you do that is sin. Mm-hmm. And Gaudiyas, sometimes we use this word sin to describe those who are turned away from Krishna also. So anything you do with the non-awareness of Bhagavan is sin. So that's another way the word sin is sometimes used in our tradition. But generally, sin was understood as if you do that which is forbidden in Vedas, that is sin.
Okay.
So you're also turned away from God when you do that. But then there's the fellows who are pious. They do what is in the Vedas, but they do it without awareness of Bhagavan. So Gaudiya said that is also sin. And then you have, the table gets turned. Some fellow is doing something that is forbidden in the Vedas, but he's a devotee of God. So he's, vindicated or he does sin with impunity. So it gets interesting like this.
Yeah, I mean, but Krishna will deal with him in his own way, though.
Yeah, or we'll hear it later. Or the sins that he does after becoming devotee is like the biting of a snake without fangs. So having no effect. Or if this fellow is sinning on the strength of chanting, then that's an aparad. Or Krishna may rectify him in some different ways to augment his bhakti. So in this way, it's all very dynamic. The twins are saying, what is anime? Anime is short for animation, refers to this sort of Japanese animation that a lot of guys we grow up on loving. It's anime, this Japanese animation and TV shows. So in a lot of the TV shows, anime, I didn't actually watch that much anime growing up, but in a lot of the anime TV shows, because Agape is giving an example, a Brahmastra weapon has been thrown. So like some powerful weapon is blasted, and then they'll show the anime character going through like this whole conversation in his head, while the weapon is coming. And it's just like, dude, that weapon was moving very fast. How do you have time for all this internal dialogue or even external dialogue when that weapon is moving at that speed? So similarly, a Brahmastra weapon has been thrown and Arjuna has time to offer these beautiful prayers to Krishna, and Krishna's reciprocating. So he's calling it as an anime moment. So yeah, that's to my point also. So someone may question, come on, bro, that seems a little bit. No, well, whether it's true or not, who can say? Literally true or not, who can say, honestly? But Vyasa wants to teach us something with this story, so that part we can take. Things can happen in slow motion, sure. Okay, so we'll stop here for today. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Gaudiya Guru Varga ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bolo.